but basically we've been around forever, so we can do just about anything. So even if it's not a traditional old parquet pattern, like we can probably do it.
Okay.
So that's just kind of a starter introduction. I can pass these wood samples around and kind of go through the presentation first, or we can walk around a little bit and I'll show you kind of what our showroom is like. It's up to you guys.
Yes, I think
Yeah,
a
let's
tour
do that.
maybe.
All right, let's get familiar. So, and did you want anything to drink? I've got like water and Dr. Pepper or something.
No, I'm okay for now.
Okay.
Maybe later for sure.
All right, so for starters,
My shoes are squeaking.
this side of the showroom is our wood showroom. So in the front half, we have pre-finished materials. So we do have a small selection of luxury vinyl tile. So that is an option for some people. But in general, it's gonna be wood. So this is engineered wood, and we will get into all the specifics about what that means later. But this is gonna be the pre-finished engineered. So this means that it's finished in the factory, all we do is come in, click it together, and be gone, basically. I mean, we glue it down too, but.
Do y'all install as well?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And then this side of showroom, wood showroom, is going to be site finished materials.
Okay.
So this means that it's going to come in raw, and then we are going to come in and sand and finish and do all of that on site. So we can do any kind of custom color or any kind of custom finish, a custom scrape. All those things can be done and decided on site by the customer at the time of installation.
Is that walnut?
So no, this is not walnut, though it does look like it. This is actually a white oak that has been fumed. So fuming is a whole nother process that it's, you know, chemicals and all sorts of things that it changes the characteristic of the wood itself.
Wow.
So depending on how long it stays in the fuming container, essentially, will make it darker or not.
Oh.
I think, yeah, this is, let me make sure which one is which. I believe this is the other one that has also been fumed, but I could be wrong. Because we have another one that's also been fumed, it's just a light fume though. It might actually be checked out, 'cause I don't think that's it. But so the longer you leave it in there, the darker it gets. And it just penetrates deeper and deeper into the wood, changes the composition of the grain. It's pretty incredible. So, actual walnut is what we're standing on. This is a character walnut as well. This is oak, but it's reclaimed. So you typically, and we're gonna look at all the raw woods and everything like that to start with, because the raw wood will determine what types of colors you're actually able to accomplish on your floor. So you will pick the wood species based on the color that you're trying to kind of get to. Not necessarily a specific color, but a color type. If you want the natural colors and the grays and the things like that, then we're gonna wanna go with like a white oak. If you're going with something like this, or you know, this type of thing, then you could go with either a red oak or a walnut or things like that, because they're gonna lend themselves to those colors. So, yeah, but yeah, this is a bunch of site finished options. Most of what we're walking on is engineered, but it is site finished. So that means that it has been glued to the slab. We are on a slab right now. We have a warehouse underneath us. So we're on a slab. Most of this has been glued down, but we finish it on site. So again, it's raw, even though it is engineered. So we'll get into those details a little later.
What are you seeing, like, trend-wise? Are more people doing engineered now, or are more people
Absolutely.
doing? Okay, and do they usually do pre-finished, or do y'all do what?
I mean, I think that probably our biggest market is gonna be site finished engineered.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the fact that it's so customizable, it's a really great material. And then as I mentioned, this is our pattern room. So this is where we look for inspiration on those fancier patterns and things like that for a library or an entire house, whatever somebody wants to do.
I can see like some of this being in like the foyer area, like right when you walk in the entryway.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's this pattern called?
This one? I don't actually know the name of it, but Yeah,
It's pretty.
it's the same as that, it's the same as one we have over, on the floor in the other room.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's very neat, that kind of woven
Yeah.
twist.
Yeah.
I can call, another person out here and they can tell us all the technical pattern terms too. Or I could even look up a brochure and see if maybe I have a brochure with the patterns and the names. So I can email that, that'd be great. Okay, so then on this side of the showroom is our tile selections. So, as far as tile selections are concerned, in general, French Brown is known for handcrafted custom products, so therefore tile is no different. Most of our material is gonna be made in the USA. It's made by hand. Lead time is gonna be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer, sometimes not as long. So that's just kind of the basic idea of what we offer. We do have options that are stocked or that are not made in America or whatever, things that will help a budget, things that will pop in a pool or things like that. So we have a lot of options, but basically what we're known for is this.
Wow.
So this is actual classic traditional Delft tile, painted in Holland by hand in the traditional way, in a traditional factory. It's pretty incredible stuff, and it's all made to order. So, I mean, if you wanted this guy and this guy to be having more red instead of yellow, not a problem. Like it's all done. But yeah, so we have various different types of artisan tiles. We have the more trendy, kind of popular collections that are also artisan. These are made in Portland. These are made in Sonoma, California. So we do have, still very artisan feels, but just more contemporary.
So pretty.
Anything on this wall can be done in over 300 colors, and this can be done in over 100 colors. So there's lots of options, lots of customization available.
Now, is there different distributors that you all? Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we get them from different places. We are their distributor, essentially.
Okay.
So, what else was I gonna say about that? Well, essentially, custom products. Lots to choose from. What I was gonna say was that what we have on our walls is such a tiny fraction of what we can actually offer.
Yeah.
Because everything can be so custom.
Right.
So the fact that all of this is, there's 300 options that you can do with this tile by itself. I mean, you can't put all that in the showroom at once. So
how does that process work? Like, whenever you bring a client in here and they decide that they want to do a custom route, how does that work on y'all's end?
Well, we do have a extensive sample room, and so a sample library. So therefore, we are likely going to have some form of the color that they're looking for, or the shape, or sometimes both of them. So we can kind of start piecing those items together. We have catalogs. There's tools online for some of these places. Some of them don't have any online presence, which is pretty incredible in 2020. But they are artisans and they're old school and they're small family businesses, so it is what it is. So
did they ever send a sample of
absolutely? So yeah, we start in our sample room and see what we can piece together. If they really want to see something more custom, I'm happy to order as custom of samples, as many as we want. So yeah, sometimes those cost, but rarely, very rarely. Most of the time, the cost of those is just going to be credited back to the order itself. So yeah. So that's essentially what we've got going on here. We've got the popular encaustic tiles, but right next to it we have something that's been around a bit longer. This section here is called KJ Patterson, and it is also an encaustic tile, but it's actually more like a stoneware. So instead of it being this encaustic cement that you see everywhere and can get from anywhere and buy online, and it's all these bright bold colors that is cement, this is actually like a porcelain tile essentially. It's the same thickness as the typical tile, which so the cement typically isn't. It's at least a half inch thick. So this is more like the 3/8 of an inch, which you would see typically.
Right.
And it also is going to be much more durable. It's gonna wear in a lot of different places, that you wouldn't be able to put the cement.
Right.
So it's gonna be a lot more expensive, but again, it's been around a lot longer. It's the sort of stuff that you would see in Europe, like the actual stuff. This is replicating that,
Right.
but this is the legit thing. This is made in the US as well though, so.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Yeah, they've done a great job figuring that out, creating large scale.
And so with each of the pieces, do you give them, the client, certain specifications, like it can be applied in this area or this area? Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. So since we have so much, there's different applications that are appropriate for each different material. So yes, that one you can put anywhere in the world. I mean, if you want to put it in your pool, in a fountain, on the floor, outside, wherever you want to put it, you're good.
Okay.
Whereas the other, you can technically put it outside and in a laundry room and on a floor.
It might not.
But it's porous, so you'll want to seal it on a regular basis, you'll want to maintain things like that. It's not acceptable for like a freeze thaw, so if it's going to be submerged or wet a lot in the uncovered areas outside, it's probably not your best idea. So yeah, things like that, you know, there's little technical things that I'm able to provide for anything that we have, just about.
Okay.
All right. So, these things are going to be less, well, that wall's pretty custom too. This is a bit less custom, mostly gonna be stocked, again, great for pools, so it's got its own market. It just, you know, depends on what you're looking for and what your project is. But typically this is gonna be stocked in California, maybe New Jersey, but it is typically made like in Asia, so it just kind of depends on if you want it custom or a custom layout of it. Those are possibilities, and so those things take longer, but otherwise in general we've got stocked options as well. So, and most of these different collections that we have some sort of stock option. So essentially they'll have a small collection that is limited colors and limited shapes and sizes that they keep in stock on a regular basis, and so those are gonna be quick ship type of scenarios. Whereas, you know, but if you wanted to get that limited shape in one of these other colors, now we're waiting the 6 weeks. So it's just a matter of knowing exactly what their selection is, and that's the case with most of these collections.
Has lead time for you guys really changed because of COVID?
Not really. The only one that changed was the one from Holland. I think everything else maybe bumped out like a week, maybe 2.
That's really good.
So it's not been bad. I was really surprised even from Portland with all their fires and everything that they haven't been slower. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been pretty great. But yeah, Holland, the last big order we had, it was a huge order. It was like for somebody's entire kitchen, entire laundry area, a desk area in another space. Like it was so much tile, and because of the lockdown, they, you know, were closed for 2 weeks, and then they were short-handed, and then they were working from home, and so yeah, that one got delayed probably about a month. But
I hate that.
Yeah.
So does the tile be delivered directly to the client, or does it come here first?
It comes here first.
Okay.
Typically, when it's something that custom, I would go through and actually inspect the tiles and make sure that things arrived properly, that they were the right thing that we ordered. A lot of times, you know, if you're ordering some Delft tile, but you're gonna pair it with a field tile from this company, or pair, you know, things like that, I like to collect it all at once and then have your installer, whoever, come and pick up everything together. So that way you kind of know everything is what it's supposed to be. Yeah, so we like that option. We do have the ability to ship it directly, but in general, with our tile selections, we absorb the cost of freight, and so any pricing that we give you is freight included. So that is assuming that it ships here. So if it ships somewhere else, we don't necessarily have that freight contract, so we would have to charge for shipping in that case. But it's definitely a possibility to have it shipped directly. If you're working on a job in Colorado or something like that, absolutely, we can do it.
Cool, that's awesome.
Yeah. speaking of, we can also do wood floors all over the country. We have people working up in Missouri, people working in Atlanta,
Wow.
things like that right now, so.
So do you, source out those people, like, or is
No.
it your team and you just send them?
We have our own installers that we employ.
Okay.
So they are on our payroll, they are insured by us.
Oh, that's awesome.
There are a couple of teams of contractors that we also have, that are not exactly on our payroll, but
Right.
they have been at one time, you know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
they have worked for us and they've decided to expand a bit and have decided to insure on their own.
Right.
But just have more people, so it works out really well for situations where we have like a whole sand and finish of something and we
Right.
put one of them to do that because they've been trained by us, they know all of our ways, and so it works out really well.
Yeah.
But in general, they are our employees. We have probably 10 or 15 installers that we employ.
That's awesome.
So we have our own trucks, our own vans, all that.
That's really attractive,
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
like coming in.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
You know, one-stop shop.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm just gonna take a drink. Then we can talk about the woods. Okay. Oh, would you like something to drink, anybody?
Okay.
There's Dr. Pepper and water.
You know what, actually, I might steal a water. I'm sorry to be a pain.
Oh, I offered. So,
Thank you so much.
there's a few different kinds of water.
Oh, wow, we're getting fancy here.
Take you up on your offer now.
So we've got a couple of LaCroix, we've got the name escapes me, and then we've got regular like Ozarka water, so it's
Ozarka
whatever
water
you
Yeah,
like.
it's
great.
okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
All right. I haven't talked this much in a while,
I
so
know.
with the mask on especially, it's
I know,
like
it's
a
a
different
lot.
world.
It makes me like kind of get sweaty.
Right, it's just like a lot. My mouth is more dry and all that. Okay, so for starters, you guys kind of have an introduction to the company. You kind of have an introduction to what we offer. So do you have any questions yet?
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, very good. So, when you are going to work on a job that you need wood flooring, this is going to be, this first page is basically going to be the sort of things that you'll need to be asking yourselves and asking your clients and things like that. So first you're gonna need to know what type of subfloor you have. Do you have pier and beam or slab? Is it a new construction or is it a remodel? And then you also wanna know what kind of lifestyle and aesthetic that the customer does, you know? So you're gonna want to know, do they have dogs? Do they have children? Do they, you know, have parties with high heels and all that sort of fun stuff all the time? Because if they do, walnut is not gonna be a great option. This table is also walnut. Walnut is a softer wood, so I'm not sure if I put it on here, but you should be able to essentially like Google the hardness ratings. It has a name and I can't think of it off the top of my head again. So, it's like the I always want to say Jenga, that's not it. So, we'll just leave it at that.
I like
But,
that.
Basically, it's a wood flooring hardness scale
Okay.
that you would determine which woods are gonna be more durable, harder, more impervious to dinging, denting, things like that. Okay, so, that's why lifestyle is important. Also, as I mentioned earlier, color, it's something that if color is gonna be a really big deciding factor, if you want that color, you're not gonna be able to use walnut.
Right.
Because walnut starts out like this.
Darker.
So, color is also going to help determine what species you're looking for and things like that. Then, when we talk about pier and beam versus slab, that is important, I mean, for multiple reasons, but especially in a reconstruction situation or a remodel. You have the options, we've talked about the options between engineered or solid. And so, let me show you what that means. This is an engineered floor. Let me pass that around to you. I'll pass this one around too. And this is solid. So on the edge of the plank, right here, you'll be able to see, or even here, you'll be able to see that one of them has a plywood base and then a veneer of wood on top, whereas the other one is just solid all the way through. It all looks the same.
Okay.
So the main difference between those two options is that with the solid wood floor, if you're on a if you're on a slab foundation, you will need to nail the hardwood down to plywood, which means that now you have to put plywood down and then your floor, and so now you've got an 1.5 inch tall floor. So in a remodel, that might be a problem if you have to cut all your doors and you can't get your appliances out of your kitchen and things like that. So therefore, height can be a big factor in a remodel. So an engineered floor allows you to have both the subfloor, essentially, the plywood subbase, as well as the veneer of wood all in one, so it's a nice thin floor.
Got it. So is that usually what you recommend for slab foundations, is to do
a lot of slab foundations do that, yes. A lot for the height reasons, because also, again, transitions from tile to wood, now you don't have as much of that height difference. So that is another situation there. There also is the case of the wider the plank you have, the more likely you're going to want to do an engineered floor, because when plywood adhered to it, then it's going to be more stable. It's not going to warp and cup and crown and do all the things that you don't want wood to do when it expands and contracts. It will do that less because it has that plywood, which is going to kind of hold it together. So the wider you go, the more likely it's going to be recommended to do engineered flooring.
I had somebody ask me the other day about like if they were worried about doing hardwoods in a kitchen. I don't mind that at all, doing hardwoods in the kitchen, but some people don't like doing it. So they were asking me about engineered, if that's any better, like for if there's a plumbing leak, does that help at all, or is it kind of the same situation?
Yeah, I mean it's because it's still real wood. So just because it has a plywood subbase doesn't mean that the wood itself isn't going to be ruined in some way. So the top of an engineered floor is going to wear exactly the same as the top of any solid floor or anything like that. Now, as far as the cupping and things like that, it is possible that the engineered could hold up a little bit better, but it's still going to get wet. Like, you still don't want to get your floors wet. So it's true, when people are really concerned that their dishwasher is going to break down, then maybe they don't want to do wood in there. But typically it's not an issue. I mean, with the open floor plans that everybody has these days, I mean, everybody's putting wood in their kitchens. So, but that's a good question. So, let's see. Then we talked about solid versus engineered. So then there is site finished versus pre-finished, which we also talked about a bit. This is a piece, it doesn't look like it because it's so light. I brought it out because of the knots, I wanted to show you that. But this is actually pre-finished. And so I'm going to pass this around because you can feel on the edge how there's a bevel. Whereas you can pick up the red one, probably is a good option for not site finish. There's not really a bevel on the edge. It's just straight and flat. So the reason for that is because whenever something is pre-finished, when we come in and install it, we glue and click the floor together and it's all laid down and we leave. Whereas with the solid flooring or a site finished flooring, it doesn't matter if it's solid or engineered. But the thing about wood is that from plank to plank, there might be some height variation, there might be a little bit of unevenness and things like that. The bevel helps to hide that and make that a non-issue. Whereas if you were to have the straight non-bevel, then now you're going to see all of these little areas. So with something that we finish on site, that's not a problem, because after it's been installed and acclimated for 2 weeks, we're going to come back in, we're going to either sand it or scrape it or do something, and all of that is going to be fixed. So floors will start to, as they acclimate, kind of move around and show those weird edges. And so that's totally normal. It's not a bad floor, it's not a bad installation, it's just that's what is supposed to happen because the floor is now acclimating to that environment. So in an engineered situation, there's nothing that can be done, or I'm sorry, a pre-finished situation, it's already been finished, so we can't come in and sand or scrape or do anything to try to fix it, so therefore there's a bevel on the edges. Another thing that's kind of a benefit to a bevel is that in general it kind of helps dirt and debris and things like that kind of fall off to the sides. I know that sounds like not a good idea because that's gross, but it is good because it helps protect the finish of the wood itself. So now you're not walking on that debris, it's essentially going into areas that you're not going to be stepping and scratching the floor.
Okay.
So that's one thing too. So those are some differences between site finished versus pre-finished and solid versus engineered. So once you kind of decide the structure of what you're wanting to get, whether it's any of those 4 options, then you're going to need to start deciding what type of wood, what grade of wood, what character of wood. So let's see what we've got. Since that one's already out, that is going to be a European live sawn type of plank. It has some knots in it, a little bit of character. It should say, well, no, it doesn't say on the back what that one is. But essentially that's going to be pretty typical character of European oak. This one is prime grade. So it's very clear. You don't see any knots. So if you want to pass that around, I don't know if that's helpful or not. And see how wide that plank is, you have to have engineered for that. I mean, that's your classic 12-inch wide engineered plank. And so you can also see the cathedraling that's happening in the center, that kind of oval. So that is because of the way that the wood was cut. So if you wanted to look at this page, we could talk about the different types of cut that you will see in wood. You will hear the terms plain sawn, rift and quartered, or just rift, or just quartered, either one. Live sawn, you'll also hear it called European cuts and stuff like that. But essentially, European oak is all done live sawn, where they use the entire tree and get the full amount of cathedraling throughout the entire log. So that is how you get that kind of look.
Are these like, is there a price difference between these? Is one like better quality than the other?
There can be a price difference. Plain sawn is usually the least, because it is going to have, let's see if I have a good plain sawn. This might be, yeah, this is a plain sawn white oak. But you see how irregular that is?
I see.
And I think the red oak is also plain sawn.
This one.
PS?
Yes.
Yeah.
PS.
So, you know, it's just a more irregular grain because they're going to get the least amount of waste. So if you're very eco-friendly or something, then you might be considering the plain sawn just because you're getting the least amount of waste there. So that is kind of how that works. So you get just kind of whatever planks they're able to get from that tree. Quartered is going to be a specific type of cut. I know that quartered and rift look really similar, but it's because the quartered is the inner cuts and the rift is these outside cuts. So you're staying on the outside with the rift and the inside with the quartered. So I thought I had, maybe not. Let's see what this way is. So, no problem. So this is a rift plank. So you see it's very linear grains, very clean. So this is probably by itself going to be one of the more expensive options. The reason for that is because, like you see here, they're only using that tiny outside bit of the tree. And so therefore they're having to cull out anything that doesn't have a super clean linear grain. This one even has a little bit of the quartered appearance to it, and you can tell that in places like this. So how it's kind of going off to the side. This here, that's quartered. So it gives it kind of like some people have called it like a tiger stripe or things like that. And that is essentially quarter sawn. That's what you get when you're getting into the center of the tree.
Is hand rift something? I've heard that term before. I don't know.
Hand rift, I'm not familiar with, but hand scraped and.
So I might have made that up.
Maybe it's like a cool guitar thing. I don't know. So anyway, I don't know if you guys want to look at that closer to see those types of characteristics. This is a pretty good example of some of the quartered characteristics. Yeah, okay. So, most of the time, most of what we install, probably the most common floor, is going to be the rift and quartered combination. So that will allow for, in fact, if you want to walk around a little bit, I can show you some of these floors. Sorry, I know it's not easy to walk with a camera. Okay, this floor is rift and quartered. So you see some planks are very straight and linear, while others are very tiger stripey. Okay. So that is rift and quartered. Then this is all rift. Okay. Yeah. So it's very clean. Now there is occasionally, like I said, a little bit of rift happening. That's just going to happen. It's right up against it, so it makes sense. This is a lot of quartered. You can get quartered only if you want. It's less common, but some people have done it. And then here is plain sawn. So you see how irregular the grain is? And so plain sawn is also pretty typical with thinner floors as well, like the narrower plank. So when you get into, this is rift and quartered. So you've got some quartered, some rift. When you get into the wider the plank you get, the less likely you're gonna have plain sawn options really. Just because you're getting a wider plank anyway, so you're gonna end up having some sort of waste, and it's just not gonna, you'll get a lot of these thinner planks from the waste of other trees, so.
Are thicker boards now, like that's more of a trend right now than it, I don't know.
You know, I think that probably the like 5-inch plank became really popular in like the early 2000s. And really kind of took off, but I don't think it's going to go away. So you still do have these more narrow plank floors in your really classic homes, like in Preston Hollow and things like that, or I'm sorry, in like Holland Park. But in a lot of places, especially a larger home, real open floor plan, things like that, those are going to typically have about 4 or 5-inch planks, if not bigger. So. Another thing to consider is that when we go to European, so the European plank, because they do cut the entire width of the tree, in order to actually get that look, it needs to be about 7 inches anyway. So 7 inches pretty much the narrowest you're gonna see for a European cut floor. So therefore, you're already up there. And that's also why European is so typical to be on engineered, because it is a wider plank. So, let's see here. Then, as we get into other species, they have different types of, I mentioned that walnut was character grade. So, this is, it's not character. This has been scraped though. So again, with walnut being so soft, when you scrape it, you're gonna see more things that make it look a little like character, but there's not actually any knots in this floor. It's just the scrape. So this is going to be a select grade of walnut. We have several in the pattern room that are all sanded smooth, so they look very select. Our tabletop is select. But we'll get more into the grade definitions when we get back in there.
Do they use a machine to
I was
do
gonna
this?
ask.
How do they do that?
Is it hand scraped?
It is hand scraped. They get down on their hands and knees and scrape this floor after it has been installed.
Wow.
It is a labor-intensive job, for sure.
I can't imagine doing like a 5,000 square foot house
Oh, yeah.
by hand.
Scraping away.
Think about 30,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we've got a few of those. So those guys are having all sorts of fun.
Yeah.
Glad it's not me.
Yeah.
And then speaking of scraping, I mean, this is even one that has been, I'm really sorry for your video. I don't have any of my words. But basically, even the edges of the plank. So normally, it's only scraped a certain way, but this one has actually made it look almost like there's tiles, almost
Yeah.
like it's a granite floor sort of, because it has the bevel a little bit on the edges as well as on the ends here. So that's super labor intensive to do that much scraping
Wow.
and that much definition.
And is it just randomly done, like they just kind of go in and?
I mean,
Or is
in
it
this floor, it's
kind of-
every single edge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's possible that that could be done beforehand, that they are essentially chipped or scraped before being put together into a pattern. So in the pattern itself, we have a table downstairs where we actually build a pattern like this in a square, and then we
Okay.
take those squares to the job site and install them like
Okay.
that.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of times we just take them raw and normal, and people do all this finishing and scraping on site.
They
That's
almost have
most
to
common.
be like artists. That's really cool.
Absolutely. It is an artisan job, and it is unfortunately dying.
Yeah.
We need more people, more young people come and scrape some floors. That's great. So absolutely. Yeah, it makes me so sad because some of our artisan tile
Yeah.
collections have discontinued because the
Oh.
person retired, and you know, she didn't sell the company and she didn't have kids or whatever, and it's just gone now. And I'm like,
Aw.
but it's so pretty. So yeah, but that's just part of
Yeah.
the world we live in now, I guess,
Yeah.
right? So then this is hickory. So with hickory, he was saying this side didn't have knots, and he was not true. This has knots as well. This is possibly a character hickory, but I mean, like these planks, that's gonna be select, or one and better, I think is what they call it. So I'll show you some of those raw pieces as well. I've got both character and select hickory. This is another ripped and quartered oak. These are mesquite. So this is end grain. So they're actually the blocks on the ends of those planks that have been sliced. These can be done in different shapes. We had one actually that was done in hexagons. It was
Oh, wow.
really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and so then different types of patterns, more mesquite, varied widths. So varied widths is something that you'll especially see when you're talking about reclaimed flooring. So reclaimed flooring is literally wood that has been reclaimed from an old barn or an old something and has been given new life in this other application. So with the reclaimed wood, it's most likely that you're going to end up with all sorts of different widths. You can specify that you only want one width from that reclaimed barn, but then you're going to pay a lot of money because they're hauling out so much and trying to make that and ending up with a lot of waste. So, you know, typically when you go reclaimed, it's all the way. You want to get all the widths and all the character and all the crazy, so.
Do y'all deal with reclaimed often? Okay.
I'm not sure how often I would say,
Yeah.
but yes, absolutely, it's something that we do. And when you want something that is a little bit more consistent than actual reclaimed, we can make it look reclaimed, you know, like you mentioned on that floor, you're like, oh my gosh, is this done with a machine or something?
Yeah.
Like, no, it's just hand scraped, like we go in there and do that. Some of these floors, like this one, actual reclaimed, a peg to fill where the joist was in the wall. So
Yeah.
little things like that, it adds the character, that's for a certain customer, and it's a
sure.
great option. But we can also just make it look like that, you know, kind of beat it up. This here, once upon a time, that's how they nailed down floors.
Really?
With wooden pegs. And so we recreate that. We actually have to drill holes in the wood and lay pegs every certain place. So that's a whole thing that, you know, we can make that happen again and
Yeah.
get through that look but yeah, that.
So is this the same kind of thing, like the, that's hand scraped too?
Mhm,
Cause it kind of does
This one
have
has
that.
the crown bevel.
Mhm.
So this one is a crown bevel.
Okay.
You can really see it on that. This is a walnut. But again, like this one has it also on the ends, not just on the side, whereas this one doesn't really have it
Right.
on the ends. So yeah, I think that's pretty much what I was gonna talk about, was the different grades and things like that. This floor over here is also hickory. Oh yeah, here's that pattern you like.
Oh, yeah.
So this is definitely a character hickory. So some of these floors are good to see too because they're really close to the typical natural color of the floor. So it kind of shows you what they lend themselves well to. I've got the raw pieces in there so we can check those out as well. But the mesquite, you're never gonna get rid of the red. It's
Right.
always gonna be a red floor.
Yes.
So, yeah, things like that. And then as you've noticed probably, in a lot of these patterns, there are multiple colors.
Yes.
It's actually two different woods put together, all stained one color.
Oh.
So the oak reacts
okay.
differently than the walnut to that stain. Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Is that
So,
even the case for something like that has that like, wow.
It's just different species of wood.
Really cool.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see what we've got. More water. On the second page, we have the different grades of, you know, oak. It's really a lot of products will have similar levels to this, except like hickory and walnut, a lot of times it's either clear or character. There's not really a whole lot of in between.
Okay.
But in general, clear is going to be the crispest, cleanest, least variation. When you go plank to plank to plank, they're typically going to stain very similarly to one another. They're going to absorb about the same. They're going to have the same grain, all of that sort of thing. No knots. So that is going to be a more expensive floor. They're pulling out everything that has an imperfection whatsoever. Then you go down to select. Select is going to be probably one of the most common options. We do a lot of rift and quartered select grade wood, select and better. And so we get some clear, but mostly it's going to be select. That's a very typical floor for us. So you see though, the main difference between the two is that one of them has more variation from plank to plank. So it's still a very clean plank. Every plank still looks really, really clear and nice, but they might absorb a little differently. So then you have number 1 common, number 2 common. It's just working its way down as far as variation from plank to plank, but then also you're adding in more knots. And so you're having, you know, a few more imperfections. And so when we get into the knots, let's see if I have, I didn't bring that other one out here, that's okay. But I guess the European oak is a good example. That one has just small knots. They're not big. We will go in and fill them with wood putty, stain them just like the rest of the floor. You're not gonna see a hole in your floor, but it is going to have those knots and those characteristics of where that grain was a little wonky, as opposed to something that's super clean like this one.
Right.
So that's, you know, number 1 and number 2. So that is going to be the most common wood characteristics for oak especially. So then, let's see here. And so since we were talking about common characteristics of that, we can go ahead and talk about the other species that we might talk about. So white oak, again, it's gonna be the most popular, especially right now. People want natural looking floors, gray looking floors, all that sort of stuff. You gotta do white oak. Then beyond that, red oak is still very common, especially for remodels, because they already have their wood installed. It's probably red oak, and we go in there and finish. It's just gonna have to be more of a medium brown color, because again, you can't take the red out of the wood. There are special things coming on the horizon about how to possibly get that out. People talk about bleaching wood, but that messes with the characteristics of the wood itself. So there are, though, other things that they're experimenting with to try to help mitigate some of that paint.
That's really cool.
So, I'm sure that we will be all over that.
Does that, I'm sorry, what was that process that you called,
Fuming.
fuming? Does that do that at all, or?
No, it's a different kind of coloration that
Got it.
happens with that. Let's see here. So, red oak. Walnut. As we have discussed, you've seen character walnut with some knots in it. This is a clean, select walnut. And so that has, you know, just the real soft grain. It's not necessarily going to be considered rift or quartered or plain or any of that stuff. It's just this table and that board there and that board there. They are just walnut. I mean,
Come as they are.
yes. So they're going to either be clean or character. So they're either going to be select or character.
Okay.
And so character is going to just have more knots, and typically those knots are going to be fairly large. It's a fairly rustic plank. This is actually hickory, but it's a similar situation. When you go with like a character grade walnut, you're going to have similar situation with this kind of knotting that happens. When you go character, you can still get it on engineered. I'm saying that because this particular one is a solid character, and you see the knot all the way through the back. So, you know, that is a thing. It's not actually showing on this side where that knot is on the back. So, let's see. This is one hickory. This is another hickory. I'll pass these to you. There we go. So, the one on top is the character hickory, and that is going to be your most common type of hickory floor. You have lots of knots, lots of character. You're going to have, you know, more color variation from plank to plank, and even within the plank, you can see that one split basically right down the middle.
Yeah.
Half of it's dark, half of it's light. So that's going to be probably the most typical way that you see hickory floors. But there is also select hickory. This is typically, I think it says number 1 and better. So 1 and better, or select, or things like that. It gives you a really clear wood. That particular one is a wide plank. It's on engineered, you know. So again, doesn't matter what the species is, doesn't matter what the character is or the grade. You can get it on engineered or get it solid. It's just a matter of the width you want.
Right.
One would be smarter than the other. So. All right.
Is it more
so.
cost effective with engineered than
Not
solid?
necessarily.
Okay.
So sometimes the pricing can be a lot different between the two, and then sometimes it kind of just washes out because with solid, we're having to install plywood, felt, poly, all sorts of things that we have to install first, and then install the wood on top of that. So that adds a cost as well. So while engineered material is going to be more than solid material,
Right. Not as much labor.
it's not as much labor. It's the glue costs something, and there is labor still, but it's just different. So depending on what it is, it's very job specific. Sometimes it washes out, and sometimes the engineered is more. Sometimes the other is more. So it just kind of depends. Let's see here. So we talked about. I already showed you the walnuts. Good. And then maple is that light colored floor there. So it has the dark pieces through it. That's like a wingay or a ipe, some sort of dark wood that has been placed within the framework essentially of that board. So, but that light color, typically maple doesn't stain very well. It stains kind of blotchy. There are different conditioners you can put on wood to help it stain more consistently, but in general, maple, if you want a maple floor, it's because you want maple. You want that lighter look. So yeah, you're not going to get a really deep color out of that one. So, but it is another, you know, somewhat popular floor. Hickory, pine, mesquite, those are gonna be other floors. We've talked about hickory quite a bit, but yeah, pine and mesquite, you don't necessarily see them in Texas as much, but you will see them in other areas of the country quite a bit. So, let's see here. Then, before I move on, I'm just gonna show you, like, this is one plank that is the reclaimed. So we can do domestic reclaimed or European reclaimed. So we can get material from Europe that is from even older buildings than what we have here. So it can be, you know, really, really, really cool.
That's awesome.
This is domestic, but still, it's, you know, it's got all the character. It's got the little trivet out of the side and cracks in it from the weather and the wear. So one thing about reclaimed, we also have a river reclaimed, which means that it's a log essentially that was sitting in a riverbed,
Oh wow.
being washed over for years and years, and now that log has been taken out and planed into planks. And so that has a really interesting look on the grain. That's very cool, because it's not like old and cut up, but
Right.
it's, I don't know, it's just a very
a lot of
neat,
character.
yeah, it's a very neat kind of plank. I'll see if I can get one of the guys to grab it for me.
Yeah.
But let's see, so those are different types of planks, cuts, species, etc. The sky is the limit. Then there's how do you want to finish the floor? So we've talked about this already a bit, whether you want it sanded or scraped. So we've talked about how when you sand a floor, that's not necessarily the easy job either. Most of our guys don't want to sand the floors, they want to scrape them. Sanding a floor is very labor intensive as well. And to get it done right and smooth and clean and all of that, it's a whole other artistry. So something to keep in mind, just because it's not scraped doesn't mean that it's not labor and all of those things. So so you can pick sand versus scrape. Typically a scrape is at least a light scrape. We have a different kind of scrape than a lot of other flooring installers in the industry in the area. We are a very specific type of scrape that gives it a very natural, worn type of old floor appearance, as opposed to something that looks like you just took a blade to it and made crazy stuff happen. But you know, like this floor just looks like it's been walked on for years and years, which it has, you know, it absolutely has. But I mean, it looks very natural that way. So that's our kind of scrape. And so therefore, when people are talking about, oh, the scrape's not popular anymore, everybody wants to do wire brush and sanded smooth and all of those sorts of things, because that's more contemporary. But honestly, like a nice light scrape on a floor is gonna help the floor be so much more forgiving. So when we were talking about kids, high heels, dogs, all those things, on a scraped floor, you're not gonna notice that one bit. But on a sanded floor, you'll be more likely to see those imperfections. You'll be more likely to see dust and things like that, debris and other whatever happens to your floors. It's going to be much more apparent on a smooth floor than it would be on a scraped floor. Then patterns versus plank. So you can get the exact same wood, all these things that we've been discussing. You can pick what you want to go within these patterns. I mean, that is a very wide plank to use with a pattern, however, it works perfectly, and the one next to it as well. It's a very wide plank, but it's a beautiful pattern. And then you also have the ones like the one below it, this one here. So that's a chevron that actually is on a more of a 30-degree angle as opposed to the 45 that you normally see. So it's a little softer, but yeah, so with the plank, species of plank, whether it's on engineered or solid, matters even less, because in the case of a pattern, you're dealing with very short pieces of wood, and so therefore they don't necessarily need to be nailed down. They can be glued down to the slab just like an engineered would be. They're not going to move around the same way that a long plank would potentially move on this side different than it is on this side. You're dealing with very short pieces. So typically patterns are just made with whatever wood makes the most sense for our installation and construction purposes, and what's available and things like that to make the cost most affordable for the end consumer. So, you know, that's something to be less concerned with, because again, once it's installed, you can't tell. I mean, you can't tell that any of that is engineered. So, that is also something that is interesting, and another custom capability. Then there's a difference between finish. So you can do wax, you can do polyurethane, or you can do oil. So most common is going to be polyurethane these days. So you can do an oil-based or water-based polyurethane. They're both very durable. They are both very good products. There is two different schools of thought as far as which one is better, because oil-based polyurethane, again, when you're doing the light floors, the natural colors and the grays and things like that, you don't want to use an oil-based polyurethane because it will amber over time. The oil in the polyurethane actually will start to turn yellow and change that color of the floor, whereas the water-based won't do that. So in that situation, everybody agrees you kind of need to do the water-based. When you're dealing with a floor that has color to it, or a medium brown or something like that, the oil-based polyurethane actually is kind of a nice option because it does give it that richness and that ambering and that sort of thing over time. So it's actually quite nice. However, some people believe that the water-based does the same thing. It didn't used to. It used to almost give it kind of a hazed appearance almost, but it doesn't anymore. It's nice and clear. It's a good product. It's a steady finish. There's just different opinions on if it's actually a deep, rich type of feel or not. And so time will tell as it goes on, because it is going to be better for the environment. It is going to be something that dries quicker and therefore is easier to do during remodel situations, because now the homeowner can start moving their stuff in sooner.
Right.
So there's a lot of benefits to water-based, and I think we'll be going more that direction. But I mean, oil-based will always have some people's hearts.
So the polyurethane has the stain in it?
No.
Okay.
So stain is something that we can put on any floor in any way first, but then you have to protect that stain.
Okay.
So the stain is really just a matter of coloring the wood and penetrating some of that wood so that it's less likely to be stained by something that you drop. But then the polyurethane actually protects the stain and the finish and the wood again beyond that. So the polyurethane will protect again more from water, more from other things that you would drop, more from scratches and things like that. It will protect the wood. With the polyurethane, if you do end up having a whole area that's been scratched up for whatever reason, maybe you were dragging furniture across it, or maybe your dog went nuts, there is an option to screen and recoat the polyurethane without actually having to resand and stain the floor. So in those situations, we essentially take off the top layer of that polyurethane and then just recoat it, and your floor is good as new. But typically when you do that, it needs to be the whole room,
Right.
or the whole house if it's an open floor plan, or so it's a larger space. You can't just do one spot, because the sheen of that is not necessarily going to match the sheen somewhere else. So in order to get it looking consistent, it's best to do all of it together. So that's one of the biggest difference between polyurethane and wax, and even oil.
So is there, the polyurethane comes in like how paint does, like satin, matte, or anything like
perfect.
that?
Yes, I'm glad you said that, because I forgot to even mention it. But yes, I can grab those boards as well. I mean, I'm sure you are familiar with what matte looks like, but these polyurethanes. So this is the natural. This is the satin. And this is the
Let's move these out.
Oh, pretty.
So I mean, I think that looks pretty rich, pretty nice, you know? So the natural, as you may have gathered by the name, is it makes it look as natural as possible. That is a finish that you will
This
probably
one is
put
the
on the floor.
natural? Okay.
That's probably one that you will put on a floor without putting a stain down first, and you will get that very raw feeling look of the floor. It doesn't necessarily feel raw, but because it's been sanded and all of that has been taken place, but you really get the truth of that wood as far as the sheen is concerned. Satin is going to be our most common. That is the most popular finish.
I don't know if you can tell the
Nice.
sheen on that.
Yeah. It's hard to see that sheen. But it has just enough to give it a little bit of richness, a little bit of fullness, without being overly shiny. I mean, the semi-gloss, there actually is also high gloss options. That's just not something that people really do. That does not wear well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound like it would last very long.
Right. So semi-gloss is an option, but like we just said, it's you're gonna see the shinier something is, the more you'll see the imperfections. So the more likely you're gonna see the shadows of where it's been scratched, or the shadows of where a plank might not match up just perfectly because the heater turned on and now your floors have moved a tiny bit. So semi-gloss is going to be the least forgiving of the three. So that's why satin is so popular.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
Okay, so very good. Then with the wax, as we were talking about touching up and having an area that maybe got scraped a bunch or something like that, wax, you can actually just go in and buff it yourself. You don't even have to have us come in. If there's an area that looks like it really got messed up, or maybe you came in with your umbrella and put it on the wax floor, and now you've got a big cloudy spot on your floor, which we have out front, and I'll show you if you want. But yeah, somebody came in and just put their umbrella down right there. I'm like, I'll just leave that there so I can show people. So that's essentially wax and water do not mix. So a wax floor in a kitchen is not a good idea. Whether it be on tile or on wood or anything, just don't wax your floor in your kitchen. But it is nice that you're able to go in and buff out certain spots. We sell the pads and the wax and everything that you would need to buff it yourself on the little day-to-day type maintenance things. But we also, it was really cute. We had a lady call in today who was like, I'm calling for my yearly wax. And it was just really precious. But so, we got the guys out there. They go out there and buff the floors and wax them, and everything is just good as new. And they do that to the entire floor, the entire house. And so it just, it keeps, that's essentially how you clean a wax floor too, because you can't use water on it. So the way that you clean it is, if you actually got some sort of soil problem on the floor, then you will clean it with regular floor cleaner sometimes, if it's really bad. But then you messed up the finish. You took off the wax, and so you're going to have to re-wax and buff that area. But the fact that you can do that yourself makes it not that big of a deal. It's just a more strenuous cleaning process. So, most people have gone away from wax floors because they don't want the maintenance of it, but they are a beautiful floor. The 3 floors over on this side are all waxed. Everything else is polyurethane. But yeah, it's gorgeous. So for the right person, especially back in the day, that's the main option that there was, and people that fell in love with that floor and got used to the maintenance, they kept it, and they're still getting us to come out. It's great. The last option I actually know the least about, but it is the hard wax oil, or we also have a finish that's called magic oil. So these options are typically going to be a more matte finish, but not natural exactly. They're going to vary by brand and by type and by product. This one is actually a hard wax oil. So it has a tiny bit of sheen to it. If we want to look at that again. But basically that one also has a similar characteristic as far as touching it up and dealing with little day-to-day imperfections or things that happen as you live with the floor. You can actually use a certain product that we sell with it to kind of buff out those issues, those problem spots. So that's something that's really good about that. Another thing to just keep in mind when you're going with a pre-finished option, I'm sorry this is a little off topic, but when you go with the pre-finished option, and I keep pointing back to that corner of our showroom, but even though it has a finish on it already, and that's why you bought it and you love it and it's great, the engineered floors that we have are going to be a higher quality. So that brings us to the last page. So, these engineered floors on your left are the higher quality engineered floors, which is like what we have. So if you've seen on some of these planks that we've passed around, there is a very thick wear layer of wood, including on that one that's pre-finished. So that wood that is on top, that is solid, real wood all the way through. So therefore, if you decided down the road that you didn't like the gray floor anymore, it still could be sanded. So while that gray is difficult for us to actually match on site, so that's why you bought the the pre-finished option in the first place. Maybe 10 years ago you don't want the gray floor anymore, and so we can come in and sand that down and refinish it. Usually with our pre-finished options, you can refinish them at least twice in their lifetime. So it's still a great option, and it's not necessarily something that you have to completely replace just because it had a pre-finish on it already. So that is the difference between our engineered wood floor and other engineered wood floors that do not have a very good wear layer, because that wear layer really limits your options. If that floor gets dinged up and gets messed up and things like that, you can't go in and fix it. And sometimes it even is so thin, or like a laminate floor, that's the thing. People have to be very careful with their language, because laminate floor is different than engineered floor. A lot of people hear the word engineered, and because it's man-made, they all think laminate. It's a picture of wood on top of something, but that's not the case. Engineered is just been engineered to function better. So they've taken wood and engineered it to function. Whereas a laminate is literally a picture of something glued on top of a piece of plywood or MDF or something else. So in those situations, and even with the lower quality engineered flooring, if the wear layer is so thin and you get a gouge in it, now you have that plywood showing through, and it just, it's not a good look. So, solid or high quality engineered, they're gonna wear just the same. And the reason for that is because on your solid plank, I know this isn't engineered, but still, this groove, the tongue and groove, that's as far down as you're able to sand anyway, because that's where the nail goes. So therefore, on a solid wood floor, if you're sanding all the way down and you've sanded it now 4 times or 5 times or 3 times, and now you're about to hit the nail, we can't sand it anymore, so you're done. Well, that's about how far the top veneer goes on a lot of our site finished engineered options. So a lot of the raw material that we get when it's engineered, that veneer goes almost all the way down to that groove. So you can sand it just as many times as you would a solid floor.
Can the installer tell when they're about to get there? Like, is it
Our
easy?
installers can?
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it. Well, I think in general what they do is, I actually saw one of them do it one time. They took just a business card or a piece of paper or something and stuck it down in between the planks. And however far down it went, and marked it. Yeah. I was like,
Good to know.
Simple. So, but yeah, I mean, beyond that, because that's not always gonna be your most accurate source, taking up a piece of carpet or something that's on an edge, that will help tell. But otherwise, I mean, these guys basically know. They have been in this industry for so long that they know what they're doing, they know what they're looking at. They can go into a floor that's been stained and lived on and all that sort of stuff and tell you exactly, that is a rift and quartered white oak that's, you know, got the selective gutter, and they know it all, even if it's a dark stain. I'm just like, how do you know it's white oak and not red oak? But partially because also, and this isn't something you can tell when it's installed, but the edge of this plank, let's see if I can actually tell. Yeah. No. Well, this one has more holes. It's a little more open.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this one looks
Yeah.
a little cleaner.
Yeah, I
You
can
know,
tell
so
that.
in the ends, you can also see
You can see little holes in there.
Sort of the difference between
See
the
that?
white and the red.
Let me see this here. Oh, okay.
So there's all sorts of little things that you can use to tell.
That's cool.
But yeah, in general, you'll be able to tell the difference between red and white oak because the red oak is gonna look redder.
Right.
Yeah.
Even in a stain, but
Mhm.
like this floor, it's hard to say. It's probably white oak, but
Yeah.
anyway, so that's basically what I've got. I feel like I'm forgetting something, so do you guys have questions? You typically ask something that I've forgotten, so that's good.
I guess my only question, El Centro likes to focus a lot on like sustainability. What's like, how does that play into wood floors? I mean, are reclaimed woods really that sustainable, or, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me actually get somebody else out here to answer that, because that's a good question. My assumption is that wood floor is, in general, a sustainable product. I
Mhm.
mean, it's something that you grow, kind of like bamboo flooring.
Mhm.
Bamboo is another thing that we're not even gonna get into, because that's a whole nightmare, but because so many people don't harvest bamboo properly, and so
Right.
it doesn't actually mature all the way, so the floors end up having problems. But essentially, I mean, trees can be planted and grown all the time, so in general, I would say that it's very sustainable. And the fact that it can be refinished multiple times
Mhm.
helps it be more sustainable, because you're not having the waste, having to go into a landfill and things like that to replace. But let me go grab somebody and see about, like, with reclaimed and the different
Yeah.
options, how that
Thank you.
goes. Yeah.
Hi.
This is the wood guru, so this is Justin Brown, so he is third generation of this family-owned company. So he's gonna know the ins and outs of your questions.
Okay.
So,
What do we got?
the first one is about sustainability and
Yeah.
reclaimed flooring. Is it actually more sustainable than some other type of wood? Is it more environmentally friendly? Things like that.
I mean, it's not really sustainable in the fact that it's not gonna regrow, like bamboo or cork or something
Right.
will. It's, I guess, more green since you're really taking a barn down or a building as opposed to cutting trees down. But you're not getting any kind of, lead points or anything like that for
Okay.
using it. It's just, there's, like I say, they're not planting a tree
Right.
to, because they're taking a barn down.
Yeah, I feel like if you want reclaimed, it's more because you like the look of it.
Exactly,
More
yeah.
than anything.
Yeah, there's, and you can get a lot of really wide stuff too, and stuff that's got texture that you just can't get out of, just regular flooring, like where the floor kind of undulates and has movement to it.
Right.
I was down actually in Houston yesterday with a guy who's got, that's pretty much what all he does, and he had, boards that were this wide.
Wow.
He was using for floorboards and stuff, so it was,
And they're like cut in weird shapes and stuff.
no, he's straightening them all out, but I mean, it's pretty impressive to see when you see how old it is and how big it is. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing. Would those be more sustainable too, or more like least waste producing and things like that with the ones that
Well-
go all crazy? Because trees grow
Yeah.
in different directions sometimes.
Those ones that you have to cut to like
Mhm.
form, no, those you're gonna have actually a lot of waste on those
Okay.
because you're trying to
Make
form
each
them
match.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reclaim stuff, so let me see this one. So like if you have a customer that will allow for like this kind of stuff that you can fill, like
Right.
you could put a plug of wood in there.
Yeah, I showed them the board up on top.
Yeah, then you can get boards that are 12, 16 foot long. But if they don't, then you start cutting all that stuff out. You're
Yeah.
kind of getting back to, probably 4 10-foot boards. But that's how all that stuff was put together, is these mortise and tenon joints and dowel rods. There was no real, no screws or nails
Right.
really or glue. So, most all the beams that they take down and cut in flooring have some peg or some hole or something in it somewhere. So, I think it looks great when you do put the pegs in there, but
Yeah.
a lot of people just don't They don't like, they just
Yeah.
wanna see the reclaimed look without all that kind of stuff in it.
No, that sample that you'll have up on the wall with the peg is really cool.
Yeah, I like that,
Yeah.
but, it's just,
I mean,
for
because
some reason,
that's
it's
like,
not really
this
looking
is
Dallas.
truly reclaimed.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is obviously reclaimed, it's not just made to look
Yeah,
that way.
absolutely.
Are the stains kind of eco-friendly or
So,
certain brands out there?
okay, so you've got, there's oil-based stains,
Mhm.
there's water-based stains, but those are actually really hard to work with on site. They really use those more on like factory finish lines because they go so fast and then they're immediately being dried. Where if you're doing it by hand, you may put it down and by the time you actually are wiping it up, it's already drying. And so water-based stains are really tough. We just don't use them on site. So it's all is still petroleum based on the, like your penetrating stains. And then there is a lot of European oils that also have stain, and they're all plant-based oils, so I think they are definitely, they meet a lot of the LEED certification in green and all that kind of stuff. The problem with them is the durability is not great. So it's just kinda,
Yeah, trade-off.
yeah, exactly,
Kind
exactly.
of like what I was talking about with the water-based polyurethanes versus the oil-based polyurethanes, is water-based is gonna be more eco-friendly, but there is a little bit of fight about which one looks better on the floor and
Right.
what purpose you're using it for. So a water-based, there's the water-based traffic,
Uh-huh.
which is probably the most durable of any of the floor finishes, correct?
That
Maybe.
we've found, yeah.
Okay.
And that's the one that we like to use the
And
best.
that's water-based, it's not oil, but, it's still the highest performing as far as durability.
Yeah, and there's different levels of all that too, because you've got that what they call single component water bases, which are really not that expensive, and then they have two component, which comes with a chemical hardener, and those are a lot more expensive. So the catalyst that makes it harder, you know, that's
Right.
so you're paying more money, but the floor's gonna last a lot longer too.
Is that catalyst just as eco-friendly as the water-based poly?
I have no idea what it
Okay.
is. But they still meet, you know, you meet all
Yeah.
the requirements and
Yeah.
stuff,
Okay.
commercial buildings, all that kind of
Okay.
stuff, so. Cause that's honestly what most of it's used for is commercial buildings, high rises. All these places, they won't let you use oil-based products anymore, cause one, for
Isn't it
grading
less
purposes,
Smell too.
two is for the smell,
VOC.
three is for like, you can start putting you can put water-based finish down and it'll be dry in an hour and a half, and the oil-based takes 8 to 12 hours to dry. So, I still push people to use oil-based if they're doing like a brown floor, you know, really dark. I just think it looks a lot better, it's got more depth, but, if you're doing like, little colors like this, like really light colors, like that, any kind of grays, taupes, whites, you have to use water-based stuff, because if you put oil-based on it, it just turns it yellow, and it looks
Yeah.
terrible.
That happened
So-
to me. I think my installer didn't want to use water-based.
And there's, in water-based, it can be tougher to work with because it does dry faster. And it's not as forgiving, like if you don't know what you're doing, it's very obvious when it dries that somebody did not know what they were doing, where the oil-based stuff is kind of dummy-proof. So, honestly, most floor guys do want to use water-based because they think they can get out of there a day faster and just move to the next job, so they get paid more and, you know, they're doing more jobs, so
Yeah.
that's the mentality. I just think the oil-based looks better, but it's really more color than anything.
Okay.
And like I said, some people disagree.
Yeah.
Somebody here says that he has water-based on his floor and that it looks just as good as oil would.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on your perception and beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, there's still, there's still wax finishes, which we still do some. You won't find a lot of people that actually know how to do it anymore. So we still do that. So basically your finishes, you have polyurethanes that are oil-based or water-based. You have wax finishes, and then you have the European oils, or they call them burnishing oils, because you put them in with a buffer. So.
Okay.
So that's why those can be buffed in a little bit easier too. The maintenance of an oil versus a polyurethane is easier for someone to do on their own, correct?
No. The maintenance is very easy to do on poly because it's just cleaning it.
Well,
But
day-to-day
the-
maintenance, yes, you
but
clean
like-
it with a typical,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but with poly, if it scratches or anything goes wrong with it, you can't
Right.
just put a little poly because it'll
Mm.
stand out. The burnishing oils and wax, you can come in and basically reapply the oil or wax, and you can do it around the furniture, and it's fine. You know, so you don't have to move the whole house out to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to
Yeah.
maintain the
Okay,
floors.
yeah.
But same token, they do require maintenance where poly does not. It
Right.
just clean it. So
what kind of maintenance is the oil?
just cleaning. If it has to be, if you do have to put, you know, come in and put what they call maintenance oil on it, you can do that. But
Okay.
it's not. It's one of those things. It's just not. It's not like it's required. It's just if you as needed type thing. And a lot of times people don't like wax because you can't clean wax with liquid
Mhm.
because it'll start to cloud up and look milky, which is not a good look.
Yeah.
So
So you can only dust it then?
pretty much,
Okay.
yeah, you can use a vacuum or a dust mop.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you can keep the floor looking almost brand new without ever having to redo it. I mean, like this floor is wax; it's been down for probably 40 years, and we've never refinished it. Just wax it probably once a year, and
Dang, that's
That's
awesome.
good.
so
That's sustainability.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's just a. I mean, that's how it used to be done. So it also depends a little bit on the style of house.
Yeah.
Like if they're going for that old world look,
Right.
a lot of times they'll opt for the wax.
And if they already have the floor, like I was saying
Yeah.
earlier,
Mm-hmm.
we do a lot of wax and buff, you know, not necessarily new wax floors, but we go in
Yeah.
to homes
Floors,
on a
yeah.
regular basis.
That we've done floors, you know, that are 30 years old, and we're still over there, you know, waxing the floors every few years or something. So,
Cool.
I feel like you guys had other questions that I couldn't answer before, but
No, it's perfect.
what's it called when you also have the crown on the end of the grain, not just on the sides?
it's still, I mean, the floor itself would be called a 4-sided crown bevel or 2-sided.
Okay.
I don't like to do the ends because then every board really stands out,
Mhm.
and it just, I don't think it looks good on the ends, but if you've got the sides and you got more, it looks like more linear, more
Yeah.
rows without having the ends
Mhm.
showing up everywhere. And then as far as just something kind of future reference, so like if you look at, you know, like a floor like that, for instance, it's got different colors in it. You really need to use different woods because trying to stain, if you were to use all the same wood and try to stain them separately, it's almost impossible.
Yeah.
It's just, so if you ever were doing a job and you wanted to do a pattern that had different colors, you know, like some of these over here,
Right.
you need to use different woods, not different stains.
And to that point, if you really wanted to use the same wood and us finish it, that's when we're getting into, we're gonna have to be beveling that wood so that we can install it without having issues and things and ruining the finish after installation, correct?
Yeah, it's tough to, even with bevels, it's still kind of tough
Yeah.
because you still get some bleed back. It's just, it really just needs to be different woods, or you're gonna have to pay a fortune for it, cause we're gonna have to tape every little piece off.
Oh my gosh.
And then even when you stain it, then you take it up and you're probably still gonna get some bleed back, so you're gonna have to
Right.
re-sand a lot of areas you've already done.
Sounds like a nightmare.
So I pretty much just say no.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And what's that pattern called?
Oh, yeah, what's this one called? Thank you.
We call it the chalet, but this kind of came up with a name. 'Cause we came up with the pattern, like this one we came up with, and I don't even, what did we ended up naming that? It's not the Oxford, it's the
Oh, I know.
Cambridge.
Oh,
That's it.
okay.
We're just looking for European names. Like it's not
It
from
sounds very
anywhere.
fancy.
Yeah, so we're just, because most all of these patterns have, you know,
Versailles.
French names from
Right.
a lot of palaces and stuff, so we were just looking for anything European that wasn't already used, that, you know, wasn't the honeycomb pattern, or, you know, like, just,
So y'all came up with that yourselves?
So, yes and no. So, about, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago when I had an apartment, it had sheet vinyl in the bathroom. And I was looking at it, and that was the pattern. I said, well, I can make this out of wood. So that's what we did. And then this one, I mean, you're starting to see this a lot more now.
Yeah. Looks like barbed wire.
I don't remember if I saw it somewhere or we just kind of came up with it.
Yeah,
I think it was, we got a tile sample in. And same thing, I was looking at it in the tile, thinking, well, this, this is a great pattern, we could do this in wood. And so, yeah, that's where some of them just come from, like like that floor up there. My cousin's husband was in New Orleans and saw that, took a picture of it, and so we call it the French Quarter.
Oh, that's cool.
There's one that we've got, it's rectangular, but we got it on the floor there. My uncle was in France, and he was taking pictures of doors that had kind of patterns on them, and so he called it the Napoleon pattern.
Oh, cool.
Stuff like that.
So speaking of your uncle, and so there were the three brothers who all worked here. One of them still technically owns this building. The other one is owning a mill, which is also called French brown, but it's French brown wood floors. So we are French brown floors, these French brown wood floors. And so he actually takes wood and planes it down into planks and mills the wood and creates patterns and does those sorts of things as well.
So most all this stuff in here, it's all made over there. And
cool.
because it's not just for us, I mean, it ships a lot of stuff to New York.
Is that in
Florida.
Dallas?
It's not like a big giant floor mill, it's just kind of a smaller warehouse. We don't need a lot of space. It's because the orders are, especially when you're building patterns, because then you just stack them up and they don't take up that much space. But and we do make plank and stuff as well. But this is kind of the bread and butter, all the patterns and herringbone and stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's one thing you don't necessarily think about with a herringbone floor is that you do end up with some waste because it's all gonna have to be cut to the same
Right.
length.
You gotta pay for the labor to cut and groove it so it fits together, and then all the waste. So like, if you were installing just a regular floor, we order somewhere between 7 and 10% waste, just for all your cuts and stuff. But if you're cutting it into herringbone, depending on the size, you may have to order 20 to 100% more.
Wow.
So the longer it gets, the more waste, because if you open a bundle of wood and your herringbone's supposed to be 30 inches and half your boards are
Yeah.
2 foot, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of waste that goes into it. Some of those on the mill side, a lot of those drop offs we can keep and use for stuff like the smaller pieces and the patterns. But
So it's like pricing goes, how does it work? Is it by like square foot or is it,
Yep.
okay.
yeah, so I mean, as far as the material goes, it's all square foot jobs. Generally, I mean, you come to a square foot price. I mean, we don't have anything set because all of our jobs are so different. There's a few floors we kind of do over and over again, but most everything is different from one another.
Well,
So
and as you guys figured, I mean, all these different variables that go
Right.
into it
Yeah.
all play into what the price is gonna end up being.
yeah, and the material, the grade of the wood, the actual wood itself, like walnut, really expensive. You've got different kinds of oak, and then
But also the cost of wood is almost like the price of oil, where it's gonna change day to day.
it does change. Yeah.
So,
Isn't right now, isn't it more expensive? Or-
Everything's more
Yeah.
expensive. They're not really so
Yeah.
so, which has affected just a lot of our prices. So
Right.
last year, for a piece of 3/4 plywood that we would put on like a concrete and then you nail the floor to it, we were paying $23 a sheet. It is now $39 a sheet. So you're talking it's almost doubled in price in a year. And then there's also, you're starting to see shortages in like supply line, like we're starting to, the distributors are running short on stains and finishes, which is obviously a big problem if you can't finish a floor because we don't have stains. So it's just kind of it's starting to show, I guess, from like everybody ran through all their stock and surplus.
Yeah.
And now, since people were off work, ooh, I've got
No.
I'm the coach of the soccer team, and I got to practice.
Oh,
Thank you
Uh,
so much,
guys,
Earl.
nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Alright,
Perfect.
so, hopefully that helped a bit.
Absolutely.
Like I said, he is the guru, he's been in this his whole life, so, I do tile.
That's
But-
awesome too.
But yeah, I mean, it's the jewelry of a home, let's be real, so.
Tile's my favorite. I love tile.
I know,
It's
so
so fun.
And it changes all the time, there's always something new, there's always something
Yeah.
shiny and something wonderful.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Anything that we can offer for you guys as far as samples are concerned, or if you have projects coming up that you need to have, pieces of things, call us up. You have my card, so just
Okay.
let me know that you're with El Centro and you are curious about what you might be able to get. Like I said, we have a pretty extensive tile selection as well in our sample library. So, think of us as a resource, and then hopefully it'll be a resource that
Yes.
just amplifies. So,
We really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you so much
you.
for all the great
Yes.
info.
yeah,
Thank you.
I'm happy to help. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And you said your central library is here?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.